Straight red card. We're going to talk about today both the Costa Rica and Mexican matches. And, I think after the Costa Rica game, there's a little bit of panic. You had two ways of thinking about that, Brett. And it always breaks down into this, doesn't it? I mean, you got the people who panic and say, yeah, now we're, the sky is falling. We may not even qualify. And then you have the other folks who are like, whatever. They're playing it cool, like they're the Fonz.
I think both sides of that argument, both extremes are naive to an extent.
I think so. I mean, listen, that loss to Costa Rica did, add some pretty interesting possibilities to what could have possibly been a real interesting end to qualifying had we lost to Mexico. But that win versus Mexico nullified all of that potential. So
it would have made our final two games a little more interesting. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, it basically opened the door to the possibility that we may have been the team that had to go play New Zealand to get in. I think we should just all be thankful that that's going to be somebody else now. And now we can kind of relax. I guess the word is
Mexico or Panama. Who's it going to be?
Yeah, well, and we could play a role in what happens there, right? We were just talking about that because we're going to be playing Panama to close out our qualifying on October 15th. And depending on what happens in that home game between Panama and Mexico on earlier in October, 11th or 12th, I mean, if Mexico ties that game with Panama, I'm sure they're going to be hoping we put out our best lineup possible for our last qualifier versus Panama. But you know what? We're not going to.
Well, you know what? This is eerily similar to the final game against Costa Rica last World Cup cycle, where Honduras was keeping their fingers crossed that we were going to come out with a win or a draw. And then when we came out with that draw at the last second, all of a sudden Bornstein became Honduras'
a national
savior.
Hero.
Yeah. I think they named a holiday after him and all.
I think he has a statue in the Capitol.
But it's eerily similar, It comes down to U.S. and Panama. I mean, if whatever happens between Mexico and Panama in the next match in Azteca.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden Mexico has to go to Costa Rica.
Oh, that's going to be...
USA has Jamaica at home at a sold-out Kansas City. I mean, even if we do play the bench players that need time, like we were talking about this, I would love to give Johansson and Diskerud and players like that, even players like
well, you're going to see
Bedoya.
Yeah, Bedoya.
Players like that normally would come off the bench as options. I would like to see Klinsmann give them the opportunity to start, and then have like fringe players who may have a chance to make the World Cup team. And I use that stress that.
Yeah.
May have a chance to make it as coming off the bench options.
I think it's going to look a lot like the Gold Cup group, frankly.
Plus a couple other Euros, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I really think that's the kind of team we're going to be playing. The roster we're going to pick for those last two qualifiers. Because, listen, there's no need to necessarily use, the guys we know are going to go. It's a good chance to get Guzan some more time. It's a good chance to, although Guzan might rather stay in England, who knows? But
might, yeah.
But I mean, really, the scary thing about this, in my almost 30 years of watching CONCACAF qualifying and soccer, I have never ever seen a Mexican team play as poorly and play as uninspired. I mean, they looked demoralized right almost off the bat after the first goal. They were completely leaderless. There was nobody there going, hey, let's pull our crap together here. This is an important game. So I've never seen a Mexican team play this poorly during such a vitally important game when their backs were against the wall. And then the coach inexplicably pulls out the only guy I think that was making a difference in the first half, and that was Jimenez. You pull him out. So what a mess they're in. It's hard to even understand how they got there.
Well, I mean, it was so weird because watching the Mexico team come out basically starting in 2009 with what could be classified as a quote-unquote golden generation, And you have all these. They looked extremely dangerous. They beat us 5-0 in the Gold Cup of 2009. Mind you, it was against pretty much an all-around MLS started team.
Right.
However, they came back and they beat us 4-2 in 2011 with Bob Bradley. Then once Klinsmann took over, obviously they've struggled to get a result against us.
Yeah.
With that situation, drawing immediately, losing in Azteca and then drawing in Azteca again and then losing in Columbus.
Mm-hmm.
So I classify it as what I saw against the U.S. It was very much an old school type of U.S. versus Mexico clash. And mind you, it wasn't as efficient as the old school Mexican teams.
No.
Where they used to maintain the possession 90% of the time.
They were losing it all over.
Counter.
Yeah.
And U.S. would counter and score. We held up to our end of the bargain.
Yeah.
But Mexico fell short, and we still beat them 2-0.
Yeah, Mexico wanted to play possession ball, but that was just pretty inefficient. It was, turnover after turnover. It looked bad. It just really did. And I don't know. I mean, could it be? I mean, this will be the first time in a lot of World Cups that Mexico may not make it. And there's a really good chance they won't even get the whole get to play New Zealand thing. That may end up being Panama, depending on what Panama does in the next two games.
It's gonna be a tough. You got two games. They need the win in Azteca, and they need to get a result in Costa Rica. Both of which, according to history, is not are not easy come-bys.
Right, Costa Rica. That's going to be a real pain for them down there.
They need the win in Azteca, and I don't
really just kind of shocking. And listen, I'm the kind of guy that likes to see the best CONCACAF teams go to the World Cup and perform. And Mexico has always been a staple. They've been there time after time, and in some cases they've represented themselves in CONCACAF very well. And I'm not one of those guys that wish the worst on Mexico. Mm-hmm. So, the question is, with the talent that they have, aren't they really? Shouldn't they be in second? Of course they should be. But I think they're too young, and I think maybe they got a little full of themselves after the Olympic gold, although I'm not sure why anyone would do that. But as you mentioned, they've been called the golden generation, and I think maybe all these scoreless draws and just the inability to actually finish is just really... I've never seen a Mexico team this demoralized in a long time.
And you were alluding to it, and here's my question as far as that's concerned. When it comes to the World Cup, would this Panama team, would they compete better at the higher level than, say, Mexico? Even though Mexico's been performing poorly here, they do have a history of pulling their shit together when it comes to playing against top teams.
Yep. Brazil hates playing Mexico.
They have a lot of promising players on their team. They have a lot of very talented players playing at very talented teams.
Yeah.
Their clubs. But I mean, do you think that if Panama were to play the likes of Brazil or the likes of Spain or anything like that they would actually be able to compete? And I'm not saying anything negative against Panama by any means. I mean, they have a lot of talented players too. But I think Mexico. I mean, if you want to see CONCACAF teams go to the World Cup and perform well, I would even despite what they're showing right now, I think Mexico would come out as a more of a favorite compared to other top world teams.
Well, it doesn't help them that one of their best players refuses to play on the team. I don't care how much you don't like the coach and the guys that are administering. At the Federation. But, what Vela's done is, I think, pretty despicable. Can you imagine an American player so full of himself that he thinks, well, I don't like who you picked to be the coach, and I don't like the way you guys are running things, so I'm just not going to play for my national team. I mean, that's pretty crazy. Can you imagine Dempsey doing that? It just wouldn't happen. So in many ways, Mexico's kind of missing their leader. I don't know how much you could call him a leader since he's, obviously such a selfish person. But
missing a promising player on the team makes a difference.
It does.
Mind you, I'm sure they've got talented players to fill in the void. And as you asked, could you imagine any player from the U.S. doing that? And I would say no, because you could simply look at the whole Donovan hiatus from the national team, and we were all, like, what the hell's happening here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We were all shocked and all that, that Donovan, who's led our team to victories numerous times, led us to personal glory. He all of a sudden is like, I'm kind of tired of it. I'm done for now. And we're just like, oh shit, now we got to find somebody else to step up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's a different kind. For me, it's a different situation because of this.
Completely different.
Yeah,
completely different. But I'm just saying that we were shocked and awed by that situation. I couldn't imagine a single player coming up and saying, I'm not playing for the national team because I don't like this guy.
But it never comes up in interviews with Donovan. Everybody, he was on there with the guys on ESPN this week, and they brought up his little break, but nobody mentions that the guy had played soccer with no breaks for almost 3 years straight, going from MLS to Everton, Then in the middle of that, of course, playing almost every single U.S.
And you also left out the fact that before the Everton, he went to Bayern Munich.
Yeah.
So even before Everton at Everton, he was at Bayern Munich, then Everton at Everton. So yeah, he had a lot on his plate. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah. I mean, the guy deserved a break. Maybe he shouldn't have punished himself like that, and he needed to take a breather. But then again, there was a lot of pressure from guys like Jurgen Klinsmann saying, hey, we want our guys to be going overseas if possible and really testing themselves. And I think that's what Landon wanted to do. So, yeah, I mean, what Vela did, I don't know if I was a Mexican fan, if I could forgive him for that. I wouldn't even want him on my team if that's the way he operates.